It's time for the debut episode of the VirginiaPreps.com podcast. Here's your host, Matthew Hatfield. Welcome to the premiere installment, the first ever episode of the VirginiaPreps.com podcast. As you heard from the voice of God, if you call him that, I'm Matthew Hatfield, and glad you are tuned in. And we hope to do this weekly, if not every other week, here on the webpage. And I've been with VirginiaPreps.com since 2004 when Zirkle Blakey hired me to cover Eastern Region sports. Did not think I'd be covering high school sports as long as I have, and it's become a phenomenon with social media now and all the access through the internet, and really just been a joy for me taking over as publisher in 2016 in November, and hope to get our hands and cover as many topics as we can in the world of high school sports. So glad you are locked in and loaded for this episode. I also do some work with ESPN Radio 94.1. You can hear the Saturday morning show, High School Sports Talk, presented by Virginia Preps, each and every Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon, with yours truly and the coach Ed Young, and have a new radio show weeknights 6 to 7 p.m. in the 757, entitled The 757 at 6, which you can also hear on ESPN Radio 941.com. So we're hoping to have a lot of fun with this, bring you the coaches, athletes on occasion, perhaps administrators and media people that cover these high school sports teams, and high school football is big this time of year. And we have some special guests on this first episode. We'll be joined by Centreville head football coach Chris Haddock, his team undefeated, as is East Rockingham head football coach Donnie Coleman, his Eagles coming off a big win last week over Riverheads, the two-time defending state champs in Class 1. And we also caught up with Robert Anderson, longtime sports writer, and a great one at that, with the Roanoke Times. You can read his work on Roanoke.com. Up first, it will be Donnie Coleman of the East Rockingham Eagles. First time ever they beat Riverheads, and they're ranked pretty high. I think it's number 2 right now in our Class 2 top 10 rankings. So let's give it a listen now on what Coach Donnie Coleman told us about East Rock on the VirginiaPreps.com podcast. All right, we're now joined by the head football coach of the East Rockingham Eagles, Donnie Coleman. His team off to a great start, including a big shutout win over the Riverheads Gladiators this past week. Coach, how you been?
Doing great, man. Great.
Thanks for giving us a few minutes. I know you're not surprised, you as coaches and your kids, about the great start, but speak on what you've seen from your team so far, what you've liked the most, and anything that has sort of caught you off guard in terms of how well you've played to this point.
Just really proud of our kids. They've executed almost to a T here the last 4 or 5 weeks. We knew we had a veteran group, and they're doing everything that we ask of them, and they're good young men on and off the field, and just super proud of them, and just keep taking it one day at a time and hopefully keep this thing rolling.
Certainly, and you got a lot of key weapons on this team that we can go over here, but certainly one of them that stands out to us as a Player of the Year candidate, and again, it's only at the quarter poll, if you want to call it that, or even maybe 1/3 poll of this regular season, but Jawan Evans, your running back, I know he's a neat story on and off the field, 86 rushes, 850 yards, 10 touchdowns. Speak on what makes him such a quality football player and also a good leader for you off the field as well.
Jawan's a special kid there, man. He does a tremendous job for us. He has really matured in more ways than one. He academically, athletically, he's extremely gifted on the football field. He's got great speed, tremendous vision, everything you look for in a running back, and he kind of wants the ball, and he loves to have his hands on the ball and make things happen, and he's been doing that, and we're not going to overcoach ourselves. We're going to get the ball to our athletes.
Certainly. And what's it looking like for him at the next level? Any colleges come calling yet, or?
Yeah, he's got a couple offers right now. I know he has one from Howard University. That's his D1 offer that he has. And he has a couple D2s. West Virginia State is one of them, I know. And for some reason, the other one's slipping my mind right now. But he's got a handful of Division II offers and one Division I offer. But I think there's more to come for the young man. He's got a lot ahead of him here, and he's still growing as a person and as a player.
Well, and you've got more guys than just him, but before we move on to some of those other guys here, tell us what a college is getting in him and why they should recruit him, because we see the stats, but I'm sure it goes beyond those numbers in terms of how he affects the game, his teammates, on the field, locker room, all that good stuff.
Right. I mean, obviously they're looking for performance on the field, and I don't think you can't bat an eye at what he's done on the field so far. So we had, I've been doing this a long time, and he's a special talent. I've been in the business 25 years, and he's a great running back, and we have some other great running backs and athletes there too. But Jaywan's a special kid, and I'll promote him to the nth degree. We had a couple kids a few years ago, Javon Butler and Jalen McNair, and they had one offer, and they're really excelling right now at the D2 level. So I would hopefully somebody would take a chance on this kid.
And for those that don't know, where are those two young men at right now?
They're at Glenville State College. Both starters, 2-year starters, and they're sophomores, and they're having a really good college career. And they were just a little young when they came out, and but they've really blossomed into really good college football players.
No question. We're chatting with Donnie Coleman. He's the head football coach of the 4-0 East Rockingham Eagles, off to a great start, coming off that shutout 28-0 of Riverheads. First time Riverheads has been shut out, the 5-time state champ since 2004, as East Rock tries to go to 5-0 with Page County on tap. Coach, you mentioned those great receivers, and we talked about Jawan, but a couple other playmakers for you on offense before you shift over to the defense. Dylan Williams, your quarterback, I think he completed about 71% of his passes last year. And then Darius Byrne at wide receiver. He's a guy that if you focus on that box too much, he'll go deep on you and make some big plays, right?
Right, absolutely. Starting off with Dylan there, just a tremendous leader, again, on and off the field. Dylan, he's been a 2-year starter for us now. He was second-team All-District, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Dylan's not a combine guy. He's not going to go run the fastest 40. He's not going to throw the furthest ball. But at the end of the night, when you look at the stat sheet, he's got his job done in more ways than one. And then with Darius, just a tremendously explosive athlete out there that if you want to crowd the box with J1 and try to, we've been playing a game. If you're going to crowd the box and take him away, then Darius can make some plays out there too. And we've got some other weapons out there too. Isaac Kissling, he's a 6'4" receiver that has a couple touchdowns already, and Griffin Morris, Tanner Kissling. We've got a lot of kids that can touch the ball, and they've been together for a long time, and they've worked really hard.
We spoke back in the offseason, and you guys figured this would be a really good year for you with so many seniors and that experience from last year's team flowing over to the 2018 campaign. But I think the thing that, and I tweeted this other night in my Hats Hits, that is the takeaway is we knew about your offense being dynamic and balanced, but the fact that your defense could shut out Riverheads and show the progress it has. Also holding Robert E. Lee, who's got a lot of weapons, as you know, to 17 points. What have you seen from that side of the ball, and is that really the big plus for you guys to know that, all right, offensively we can score and move the ball on people, but defensively we can keep people down as well?
Yeah, exactly. We've kind of always been known for moving the football and putting up numbers and stuff on offense, and we try to get better every year on defense. But we've got a group of young men right now there on our defensive side of the ball. Chandler Breeden, the free safety, Blake Baylor, and I know I'm going to miss a few here, but Blake's the quarterback of our defense. He's just a tremendous player too. And most importantly, I cannot leave out these guys, but picked up a Division I defensive coordinator there in Kyle Gillenwater. And he's helped establish a mindset on our defense and a framework that's obviously allowed us to excel. And Coach Ray, Coach Long also. But that's definitely been kind of the backbone so far of our team.
And how much with the defense, too? Besides the personnel, that continuity, you mentioned a couple of changes there with the staff. Has that been real crucial here in this? Because out of the gate with your schedule, you play at Spotswood, who's a Class 3 team that's been successful in the past. Lee was in the state championship. Riverheads won a state championship. How much was it just a matter of just being on the same page with what you guys were doing schematically?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the second year of running the defense that, Kyle has implemented here. And the kids we did a ton of 7-on-7. We did a ton of practice in the off season and just getting that continuity and that team together. And, kids are making some checks now and putting in ideas. And it just helps. It can't hurt. It obviously helps tremendously there. But it's definitely one of the biggest improvements on our team.
For sure. A couple more minutes here with Donnie Coleman. He's the head football coach at East Rockingham. The Eagles off to a great start, 4-0 on the campaign as they look to continue making noise in Class 2 in that Shenandoah district. And, Coach, you've got a winning culture over there at East Rock. You guys won 9 games back in 2016, made the playoffs 2014 with 9 victories, and really have had a good run here for about 6-7 years. But in taking that next step, speak on the challenges in that and what a win over Riverheads does from a perception standpoint and mentality, because your kids were 0-8 before this past week's win, and I know that's the type of victory that can really springboard you guys to bigger and better things.
Right. Yeah, we got the monkey off of our back, I guess, so to speak. But, there's a lot of people that are 0-8 the last 8 years against Riverhead. So, I guess they're a dominant type program and develop that culture that we want to develop. My hat's off to Coach Casto and that Riverhead's program. And for what he's done for that amount of time is just absolutely unreal now in high school, especially at a 1A school. That's incredible. But, we're simply, I know it's coach cliche, man, but we're taking it one day at a time. We're trying to figure out how to get practice in tomorrow with this rain. And, we've got to go up here and play an opponent that's 5 miles up the road that's going to be dying to play us in Page County. So there's no need to look ahead any further than Monday.
Speak on that, too, with the weather. I guess how you guys adjusted with that. We had, obviously, Hurricane Florence that didn't hit the state as hard as, obviously, our friends in the Carolinas. And I know in Tyler there were no games. In Northern Virginia and Richmond they moved up some games. You guys, I believe, played last Thursday. How you guys prepared and handled that. And I know your kids were chomping at the bit to play a team with the success and pedigree of Riverheads. But how you guys adjusted things and then going into this week.
Right. Even going back a couple weeks further than that, we have heat guidelines in our county that we've got to follow. So we're losing practice time to heat. This hurricane came up the coast, and obviously there's a lot more important things than football at that point in time. And, your school could be used as an emergency shelter. And, you as a coach, you want to try to keep everybody on board. But we've really challenged the kids this year that no external distractions. No matter what happens, we're going to find a way to get a good day's work in. And when you've got 20 seniors, that's what happens. Those kids can adjust and adapt, and they've overcome that situation. And just super proud of them. I can't speak highly enough of our kids. I mean, they're great young men on and off the field, and it's a joy to go to practice every day with them.
Last two for you, Coach, and I thank you for your time. We're chatting with Donnie Coleman of the East Rockingham Eagles here on the VirginiaPreps.com podcast, as East Rock is 4-0, looking to go to 5-0 as they take on a Page County team this coming week. And I want you to tell me about, we hit on Evans and some of the defensive standouts and Williams and Brown, but there's always on a football team that one kid or one unit, or even it could be a coach or underlying story that we don't really pay attention to. Give me something through this early portion of the season that you would like to highlight that hasn't been in print yet about your football team, or something behind the scenes that you'd like the fans to know about East Rockingham football.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at, you've got, at every level, you've got different types of players. And, I mentioned Blake Baylor there on defense. Caden Bush has been unbelievable on our D-line. Jordan Good, our center. And everybody's just kind of bought into their roles, even the coaching staff. And we got a motto, one team, one dream. And they've really bought into the team aspect. Nobody's being selfish. They really care for each other, and I know that stuff from the outside doesn't seem that important to most people that haven't been involved with football, but that's a huge part of being able to develop that team atmosphere and culture and caring about each other. And it's so underrated. You've got to have that to be successful.
No question about it. And looking at you guys on the year, you've outscored opponents. I think it's 150-37 through 4 games. Been dominant. You've played a couple of championship squads that have been in state finals. I know that's a goal for every program, and certainly you guys look to be a team that's going to be in that mixture. What's it going to take for you guys to be there at the end? I know it's one game at a time, the old coach's cliche, but what are the things you're stressing this week as you move forward here to improve on, to get deep in the playoffs and have a chance to be one of those last teams standing?
Yeah, I mean, you got to fight that. You got to fight that as much as you can, and just especially, I talked about that one day at a time. And I told the kids, I said, listen, this is a big win for you guys. Enjoy the pats on the back from the community, your parents, your friends this weekend. But tomorrow morning, at 7:30 a.m., when we go in and start our defensive meeting before school, it's time to move on. And that's what it's going to take to get to that next level. Whatever level that may be, but that's what it's going to take. Just that simple one day at a time mindset, and our kids have done that. I mean, we played back-to-back state finalists here in the last 2 weeks. Our schedule is extremely tough, and the Shenandoah district does not get any easier.
No, it doesn't. And the Class 2 picture is so incredibly deep with so many quality teams. You guys, Lee and Appomattox, it's won 3 straight. Central, Woodstock. The list goes on and on with the teams. Glenver, Gretna. It should be a fun postseason, and we look forward to seeing what's in store for the Eagles. And thanks so much for your time. Best of luck this year, rest of the season, and we'll talk soon.
Hey, thanks for covering us.
Absolutely. That's Donnie Coleman of the East Rockingham Eagles with us here on the VirginiaPreps.com podcast. So we thank Donnie Coleman, head football coach of the East Rockingham Eagles, for giving us some time and chatting about his squad. We definitely think they will be going deep in the playoffs, and We hope to have a story on the webpage soon on VirginiaPreps.com for our members about Jawan Evans. Just a neat story, and he's overcome a lot off the field to get where he is, and we want to highlight him as he looks to be a prime contender for State Player of the Year in Class 2, especially if East Rockingham continues their success and goes far in the postseason. We now shift gears and caught up with Robert Anderson of the Roanoke Times, longtime writer for them. He tells us how he got there. And also we chatted about some of the key matchups in the Roanoke area this coming week involving teams such as Lord Botetourt, Blacksburg, Salem, Northside, and others. Let's give that a listen now on the VirginiaPreps.com podcast. All right, now joined by a special guest. He's a longtime sports writer for the Roanoke Times. You can read his work in the Roanoke Times, also online at Roanoke.com, and be sure to follow them on Twitter at Timesland. We say hello to our good friend Robert Anderson. Robert, how you doing out there?
I'm good. I appreciate the euphemism there. Long time. It's a nice euphemism for old, but yeah, we're doing well. We survived the hurricane so far. I think some other people are less fortunate in this area, but all in all, we got most of the games in last week, and not as much water as we thought. Hopefully, the rest of the state will be just as fortunate.
No doubt about it. It's always a scary situation in the Carolinas. We send our best to them with what they deal with the hurricane down there. Before we get to the games and players, I want you to sort of give the listeners and the fans out there a little mini bio, if you can, of you. What year is this for you with the Roanoke Times?
This is I came in 2001, so I guess year 17 or year 18th football season here. I was in worked for the Bristol Herald Courier for a number of years before that. So I'm over 40 years now in this. I didn't cover high school exclusively all that time in Bristol, here and there. But yeah, pretty much I guess you could say this is my 41st year covering high school football games.
Wow, great stuff. And I want to ask you, I get asked this quite a bit, I'm sure you do too, what do you enjoy most with high school sports? People ask me a lot, what's your favorite sport? Is there a favorite topic or sport that you like to cover or write about?
Well, covering as many schools as we do, there's a lot of variety, and I think that helps. You're not dealing with the same people all the time, and it gives you a chance to really delve into some really interesting stories. It's hard to pick a favorite sport. I kind of like track and field. If it wasn't for all the agate, the results you got to type up, but or a state meet that lasts 3 days, like it did last year in Harrisburg. But you get a chance to see the athleticism of kids. You got male and female athletes. You got a lot of schools, and like a couple of years ago, you see a guy like Tyquest Terry from Blacksburg as an 8th grader at a big track meet. I saw Cole Beck as an 8th grader with a full beard, and I was like, "Who is that kid?" You get to see these kids, and you get to see their athleticism. And the track kids are really disciplined. Wrestling, in some ways, is kind of like that. That the discipline it takes to be a good wrestler. A lot of those kids are really intelligent, and you'd be surprised that you just find the stories in any sport. Really, it's not just the ones that people consider the main sports like football and basketball. They're really some of the one-on-one stories you get on some of those other sports are they're as much fun as anything.
Oh, very true. We're talking with Robert Anderson, a outstanding reporter for the Roanoke Times covering sports here on the VirginiaPreps.com podcast, and high school football, the main topic this time of year. A lot of the readers and subscribers and message board posters out there love your work, Robert, and let's dive into it. Some of these football teams and players that have stood out thus far. I know you were at the Northside Salem game. Your takeaways from that as the Vikings are off to a great start. Salem, a couple of losses here, but we know they can rebound.
Yeah, Northside's 4-0. They put over 60 points up on Heritage. I think that kind of announced their arrival. Their first game was a 1-point win over Pulaski County, and because Pulaski's only loss, so they're obviously pretty good. I was impressed with their, just the diversity of their offense the other night. They've got a second-year coaching staff. They really seemed like everybody was on the same page, and then they've got a quarterback who's basically got a year and a half under his belt. Now this is his second and a half year as a starter, I guess you could say. Jalen Jackson he had 9 situations the other night, 8 on third down and medium, and the fourth down, and he converted all 9 of them with third down passes, first down. So a couple of them, I think, ended up being touchdowns. So I don't know if you see that in the pro or college ranks, that kind of efficiency. Salem, on the other hand, nobody wants to hear that they were beat up, but they were without their starting quarterback. They did have a starting lineman out and another one sort of hobbled, but that's football. That's what happens. Other teams have to put up with the same thing. Ward Botetourt played Blacksburg the other week and didn't have their starting quarterback, and maybe another guy or two out. But those people don't want to hear about that, and that comes off as an excuse. So that's football, and Salem's definitely young. They don't have the impact players on offense they had last year. We'll see if they can coach them up. They got Blacksburg coming up this Friday. If this is going to be aired before Friday, so they could be 2-3.
Very true, and I want to get to those couple of games here in a moment, the big ones with Salem and Blacksburg, as well as Northside and Lord Botetourt that you sort of teased there. But you mentioned Tyquest Terry earlier. He's going to the University of Virginia, outstanding multi-sport athlete, speedster for sure. Blacksburg has a coaching change. Cole Beck graduates now at Virginia Tech. Some people wondering how good is Blacksburg going to be 2 years removed from that state championship at the Class 3 level. They're now in Class 4. How surprised are you Grant Johnston, Mr. Terry, and company are rolling right now?
Not really. They're very stocked with playmakers. They've got a kid named Brian Mitchell that can play. The receiver is really fast, named Thomas Coffey. They're pretty good at the linebacker position. They're not as big as they were last year, but they're pretty tough. Grant Johnson's in his third year as a starter at quarterback. I think he threw 6 touchdown passes the other night, and Terry is just. I never saw Eddie Royal in high school, but I would imagine that he was this kind of, Terry, maybe Eddie Royal light. He's a little smaller. He's just incredibly elusive with the ball in his hands. He's an electric player. He really has got to be one of the best players in the state. There's no question about it.
And a very deep Class 4 field when you look at the likes of Blacksburg and Salem and E.C. Glass and Sharando, Lake Taylor, Lafayette, Kings Fork. It should be a fun postseason there. We're chatting with Robert Anderson of the Roanoke Times. You can follow his work on Roanoke.com and the Roanoke Times, as well as on Twitter at Timesland here on the VirginiaPreps.com football podcast. A team I want to get to as well, it's a Class 2 school, Robert. You covered their game last Wednesday, Glenver. They handled Grayson County 36-12. I spoke with Coach Clifford in the offseason. He liked his team quite a bit. Landry Gerber's at quarterback, Brady Loader at running back. Certainly a great backfield tandem. What do you make of the Highlanders so far?
Well, Clifford, since he went out there, has really he's matched the style of play with the demographic out in that part of the county. Kind of a hard-working type kids, and he's really sold them on the weight room, and they really are strong up front on both sides of the ball. And Max Philpott is undersized for height, but he's one of the stronger linemen in the area. He was the state wrestling champion 2 years ago. Last year, he ran into that kid from Clark County that nobody was going to beat in the heavyweight final, and I think that kid's at Davidson now playing football. They've got all sorts of strength up front. They're really good offensively with what they do. They can throw it and run it. He tends to just feature one back, but he's got 3 receivers this year. The Gerber's kid is 6'6", about 235. Got long hair flowing out the back of his helmet. He's a big kid back there that throws it well. I think he was 14th, 15 through the air at one point against Grayson County the other night before that game ended. So they have won close to as many games as Salem has in the last 5 years. I think it's maybe 2 or 3 shorter. That's how effective that program has been here lately.
Yeah, I think come playoff time, they're a team we really have to watch for because they've been in the hunt, and certainly in their region, in Class 2 Region C, you look at Appomattox, 3-time defending state champs. They just lost recently to Heritage of Lynchburg, got a freshman quarterback, but they're still very good. You always think of the likes of Giles or Gretna, but this is a team that could be a really hard outcome playoff time, wouldn't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think, Giles is, quite frankly, not as strong this year. I don't think Graham is as good as they have been. Dan Rivers seems to be down. James Rivers undefeated at this point, and I don't think they're at that level with Glenver. I think Glenver. To me, Glenver and Appomattox in Region 3C or 2C, they look like the teams to beat right now.
We mentioned earlier the big matchups with Salem taking on Blacksburg and Lord Botetourt against Northside. Lord Botetourt, like Salem, has had some injuries. I know I caught up with Coach Harless a couple weeks ago, and I think they were down to their fourth string outside linebacker, but they're still very strong up front, led by Jesse Hansen, the Virginia Tech commit. What are you looking forward to in those games matchup-wise, and any other games on the docket that kind of stand out to you for this week?
Well, Northside and Lord Botetourt play each other twice this year. This one is a non-district game, and then you got William Byrd in that district too. They're undefeated. They're 4-0, and they run the ball. They play a physical style. So there are going to be some battles. However you get through, and you throw Stanton River last year into the mix, which they're way down this year. But with the strength they had last year, those four teams went at it tooth and nail, and that's a tough deal to come out of there. I think Botetourt would be happy just to come into the playoffs healthy, as opposed to being healthy now. And I think they're a threat in Region 3C, no doubt, along with Northside right now. Hunter Rice looks like he's back healthy. He had a little knee problem that knocked him out of that Blacksburg game. The Hansen kid that you mentioned is going to Virginia Tech. He's a strong kid. They've got a sophomore. He's just as big as he is. In fact, I was at the game and somebody asked me, "Hey, is it number 75 Hansen?" I said, "No, it's number 72. The other kid's a 10th grader," and they just kind of looked at it at me like, "What? Wow!" So these things have never run out of big kids down there, and I know they got some coming through the middle school that are going to be the next wave. So he's also really tapped into the work ethic and the kind of kids that go to that school and sold that weight room, and it's just another. They don't have a lot of speed. That really showed up in the Blacksburg game. They were beaten to the edge quite a bit. They got beaten on cutback runs. They just don't have that kid on the edge that's got the speed. So that could hurt them down the stretch.
Yeah, that Colston Powers kid you mentioned up front, he's a beast as well for them. So Coach Harless keeps churning out those linemen, and that would be the interesting thing for me to see how they would match up should they get through that regional bracket and get to the state level. If they were to see someone such as a Hopewell or a Phoebus from the east side of the state in Richmond or Tidewater, how they would compare to someone like that. But that's so far off in the distance. And you're right, playing Northside twice. I had forgotten about that on October the 19th, the home game, the second meeting. And dare we say they could meet in the region championship a third time, right?
That's very possible. Magna Vista obviously is in there, and still got Heritage and some other people. Liberty's off to a decent start. They haven't lost yet. I think they're 3-0. So it's hard to say at this point, but it's definitely possible they could meet in the regional finals or.
For sure. Well, before we let you run, we definitely appreciate the time today and look forward to getting you on the podcast again here, talking with Robert Anderson of the Roanoke Times, Roanoke.com. Follow their work on Twitter, too, at Timesland. Tell the folks, obviously, every week you guys have the great preview and predictions coming out on Thursday and Friday. Any other items that the fans can keep an eye peeled for this coming week?
Well, maybe on the basketball front, we've got some news coming out. It might come out by the time your show airs, but.
Okay.
I think we got a commitment coming here for basketball. We've got postseason golf, weather permitting, starting this week. I think our plans got a little bit haywire after we had to get the prediction column in last Wednesday's paper since we had Wednesday football games. Hopefully we'll be back on the regular schedule this week on Friday. We can get our stats and everything back on schedule.
Well, good deal. Again, follow their work on Twitter at Timesland. Go pick up a copy of the Roanoke Times and then on the web as well at Roanoke.com. He's Robert Anderson. Thanks so much, Robert, and I'm sure we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate all the work you do. Thank you.
You got it. That's Robert Anderson with us here on the VirginiaPreps.com podcast. That was Robert Anderson of the Roanoke Times with us discussing all the high school football and high school sports action in the Roanoke area. Some intriguing matchups, as you heard, and looking forward to seeing what happens with Lord Botetourt and Northside, as well as Blacksburg, Salem, and think there's some under-the-radar stories, too, out there, as we touched on with Glenver and some other programs and players on the rise. Robert doing outstanding work for the Roanoke Times for many years, and he's one of the most respected journalists, I should say, in the entire state of Virginia, regardless of what level we're talking of sports, high school, college, or pro. By the way, he teased the story you can read about on the Roanoke Times about Quentin Morton Robertson, the point guard from Radford, state player of the year previously, and helped the Bobcats win the state championship more than once, and they could very well do it this year in Class 2. He has decided to play his college basketball at Radford University, so congrats to Q, and perhaps we'll effort Coach Rick Cormany or Q in the coming weeks as we get closer to the wintertime and basketball season. It's right around the corner, even though it's September right now. November and December will be here, and before you know it, cold weather, not always a bad thing. We close out this edition of the VirginiaPreps.com podcast, our first, with the head football coach of the Centreville Wildcats. That is Chris Haddock. He's got a state championship in his background, and he discusses some of the key ingredients for his squad this year, as well as that rivalry with Westfield. We now give it a listen on the VirginiaPreps.com podcast. All right, back here on the VirginiaPreps.com football podcast, we're joined by a special guest. He's the head football coach of the Centreville Wildcats. They're used to competing for championships, and we say hello to our good friend, Coach Chris Haddock. Coach, how's life been treating you?
I can't complain a whole lot, Matt. Thanks a lot for having me.
Oh, our pleasure, and I know it's been a hectic couple of weeks with the weather for all of you guys around Virginia, whether it be with the heat and then the rain and lightning, and now with a hurricane and Hurricane Florence. But I want to ask you as a coach, you're 4-0, but I'm imagining with your background of winning championships and competing for championships, you're happy to be 4-0, but you're also saying, all right, we haven't quite peaked yet. Is that how you're feeling right now?
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good assessment. I mean, I think we feel pretty good to be where we are right now, but we certainly have not played our best football yet. We've had some adversity, we've had some injuries, we've had a couple different things kind of keep us from that. But, we are happy with where we are, but we know that, 4 wins is not going to get us where we want to go. And so we've got a lot of work to do.
Sort of give us an update. You mentioned the injuries of what the status are of a couple of those guys that are dinged up for you on offense and defense. How are they doing right now?
We should be, one of our big injuries, DeAndre Edmonds, had an AC sprain, was out last week. He may be out again this week.
Okay.
He's been our leading tackler actually into last season. We got Kalen Jean back. We'll be back this week. We've had a couple other guys with some smaller things. Gavin Thomas has been a little dinged up, but either this week or next week we should be back to full strength. So we're looking forward to that. Good
to hear. Now, let's look at the games so far that you've played. And, of course, I know one of the things you touched on in the offseason was improvement on defense, and you've shown that. 4 wins here, holding each opponent to 14 points or less, and some quality foes there. Stonewall Jackson has athletes, as does Forest Park. South County's got a history of going in the playoffs and advancing. And then the John Champ game I want to hit on in particular, because last year their speed gave a lot of people problems, not just you guys. They beat you. Carl Garman was a state player of the year, and this year you shut them out. So what have you seen, beginning with that defensive side of the ball, a lot of improvement?
Yeah, we definitely. I think what we've gained is a lot of experience. I think the guys that are playing on defense that got a lot of experience not only last year but the year before are mature kids. We are senior led on defense, and I think that's always a very good thing. Those guys tend to play with a little bit more urgency than other guys, and I think that urgency is starting to now transfer to those younger kids. And I think that's one of our biggest assets is that we fly to the football. We've got a lot of kids that enjoy getting after it, and our defensive coaches have done a really nice job putting together schemes each week and kind of playing to the strengths of the kids that we have. And so we've definitely improved, and I think that we're playing really solid defense right now.
And to touch on some of those key guys, and thanks to technology and our good buddy Andy Hayes at Game Day, I got a chance to watch some of the Champ and South County games online, and I believe you had a defensive touchdown. I think it was Nate Goldhammer had a pick 6 in that Champ game for you, and he's one of those guys along with Lamar Horner, Trey Maxwell, Nikki Kazemka. Speak on what you've seen from those guys. You're starting to get that swagger back of not just stopping people, but getting the ball, ripping it away, turnovers, and scoring off it.
Yeah, we had a pick 6 last week against Forest Park as well. Jabbar Nune had a pick 6 last week. Nate Goldhammer had a pick 6 against Champ. We've definitely, as you said, we've not only improved defensively, but we've also improved kind of statistically. We're turning the ball over frequently. We've got 2 or 3 a game. On defense, we've had a lot of sacks, a lot of tackles for loss. So a lot of those categories that you're talking about, that I don't want to say that we're dominating right now, because I don't know that that's quite the case. We're playing really well. I think we're playing at a high level. I know our defensive coaches would like to see a few more zeros on the board, but we're definitely making some high-impact plays on defense that has definitely improved our defensive stature.
Chris Haddock, head football coach of the Centreville Wildcats, our guest here on the VirginiaPreps.com football podcast. They're 4-0 on the season. They have South Lakes at home coming up next on September the 21st, and it's West Potomac, and then that Concord district, which is always interesting, that chunk of your schedule with Oakton and Westfield and Chantilly, Madison to close it out, who I know you guys played into the year and played them in the playoffs. But let's switch over a little bit to the offensive side of the ball, Coach. You got a veteran quarterback. I think he's a 3-year starter in Presley Egbers at the QB spot. And running the ball, you guys are mixing it up with a number of different guys. Jordan Wright's had a 100-yard game, a few of them, in fact. Anthony Ramos, Jaquan Price. What have you seen offensively? A lot of balance?
Yeah, that's really, I think, kind of our strong suit on offense is that we do have a diverse range of guys that can be explosive. We have 3 or 4 guys in the backfield that you mentioned. Jordan Wright, Jaquan Price, Anthony Ramos, Kalen Jean, Jabbar Anune are all guys that we feel are dangerous with the balls in their hands. Nick Anderson, Chris Kazemka, Carrington Nickens-Iser are guys that are out on the edge catching a lot of passes for us. Presley is throwing the ball very well. And I think up front, even though we are a little bit inexperienced, we are senior heavy, so those guys have really done a nice job of kind of gelling together. And so I think we've got a nice blend there. And if you load up on any one in particular person, I think we've got some other guys that can give us some answers and kind of keep the machine running.
One thing I love about Centreville football and a lot of programs in the state, you have that family lineage. You mentioned Jabbar Anune, older brother Keenan played for you guys last year, 2-way standout. You mentioned Nickens-Iser. We remember his older brother helping you win a championship. So you keep that family lineage and tradition going, huh?
Yeah, we've been fortunate. We've had a lot of good football families come through. You mentioned the Nickens-Isers, you mentioned the Anunes. We've had the Schools. We've had we've had the Turners with AJ and Kobe. We've had the Walters with Cam and Scotty and we've been very fortunate in that regard for sure.
You tell me if it's a little bit fair or unfair. I've noticed this across the state, and especially in Northern Virginia, the football's so great up there. We see it in Class 5 with Stonebridge and Broad Run having a big rivalry, and you guys in Westfield, obviously, one of, if not the best rivalries in the state. And for a while, you guys were the thorn in their side. Lately, they've been in the thorn in your side as well as a lot of people's side because they've won 3 straight state titles. Is it unfair for people to judge the seasons for you guys off that one game based on you could see each other again in the playoffs, and B, you're both really, really good?
Well, yeah, I would hesitate to rank any of our seasons based on any one game, even though that's obviously that game is a big deal. But yeah, we're gonna if we're gonna have the kind of season that we want, and they would say the same thing. We are gonna see them twice. We'll see them in the regular season, and we'll see them in the playoffs. The 3 years that we went to the state championship, we saw them in our regional final or in the state semifinal, however you want to break that down. But that's kind of how our playoff system is. Last year we saw Madison twice. Had we won that game, we would have seen South Lakes twice, and then had we won that game, we'd have seen Westfield twice. So it's. Right now, the road to the state championship runs through Westfield. There's no doubt about it. I think everybody has to admit that. We're excited about playing them in a few weeks, but we've got a few good games here in between there that we've got to make sure that we take care of business to make that game even more significant.
A few more minutes with Chris Haddock. He's the head football coach of the Centreville Wildcats, our guest here on the VirginiaPreps.com football podcast. Won a state championship in 2013, looking to make another strong run here in 2018, off to a 4-0 start. And kind of in reference to that, Coach, last year's team, big up front on the offensive line. I mean, you had Jackson School and Brockasell and those guys, Thomas Bryant, others in the trenches. You lost some of those guys, and I felt like while you guys were expected to be good, some people might have slept on you. You lost that early playoff game to Madison. How much did the off-season program and conditioning, was it amped up even more with the early playoff exit, knowing you guys were capable of going further and doing a lot more? And you had a good year, but you guys were a little bit angry about it.
Yeah, I mean, we were disappointed for sure. I mean, we played very well against Madison the last game of the regular season, and we knew playing them back-to-back was going to be tough. It basically came down to a last-second touchdown for them. But yeah, we definitely weren't happy with that, and I don't know if we ramped things up on my end, on the coach's end, significantly, but I think the kids felt a real obligation to work a little harder on their own, and that's kind of the best kind of work, is that it's the kids are the ones that recognize that, and they're the ones that kind of took the lead on that. So that was a great feeling for me to see that that our kids felt like they needed to do more, and I think that's really kind of the centerpiece of this group, is that we have great maturity, we have some great senior leadership, and those kids have really taken the bull by the horn, so to speak, and helped to mold us into a really good start.
As you and the coaches gather and meet and talk about things, who's been that one or two guys that's been that emerging player, that breakout performer for you thus far?
That's a tough question. I think that we've got quite a few guys that have been really good. I think Nick Anderson has been a kid that was a sophomore safety for us last year and showed some flashes, and he's put on a lot of weight and with a lot of hard work, and has really been a good football player for us so far this year. And he's kind of been a jack of all trades. He's been our kicker, he's been our punter, he's played safety, he's played wide receiver. So he's been thrust into some roles that we didn't anticipate. I think some of the guys that we've kind of fallen back on, Trey Maxwell is a 3-year starter, Lamar Horner is a 3-year starter, Mickey Kazemka is a 3-year starter. Sometimes you maybe take those guys for granted because you feel like you've had them every year and they're always going to be there. But those guys have really stepped up and played some really good football for us. And, you expect that from those types of guys. But when they're fulfilling their expectations, that's a great feeling. And those guys have really have done a great job for us.
Sort of as you overview back now, you're almost at the halfway point. 4 games in the books. You got South Lakes next, then West Potomac on the road, Oakton at home, then the bye week before the big showdown with Westfield at their place October the 19th. How do you kind of assess the region right now? Everybody is sort of chasing Westfield. You got that bye week before, but these 3 games before that are pivotal for you in terms of the playoffs and power ratings. As you know, that chase is so critical. Who you could draw in a first-round game, what seed you get. How do you kind of assess it and the things that you're going to have to do to be a real threat as we go into November and hopefully in December?
Yeah, I mean, really, we expect to win every game going in. That's just kind of the expectation at Centreville. I'm sure that's the expectation at Westfield and a lot of other places around the region and the state. And so we understand, again, as I said earlier, that 4 wins is not going to get us where we need to go. We would love to, be one of the top couple seeds. That way we ensure a few extra home games in there. But we know that in order for us to get where we want to go, we've got to take every week as it comes. And the region that we play and the schedule that we play, if you don't come prepared every week, you're gonna get beat. And so we can talk about being in championships and we can talk about the playoffs and all those things, but at the end of the day, we better make sure that we're talking about our weekly opponent, because if we don't, everybody that we play could jump up and beat us. And so in order to make those games against Westfield and against Madison and Chantilly, those games late in the season, in order to make those games really significant, we got to make sure that we take care of business each week getting there. And so that's really been our focus. Certainly in the back of our minds, we want to do better than we did last year. We want to play deeper in the playoffs. We do talk about, practicing on Thanksgiving and how that's a special practice, and that week means you're playing for a championship. But at the end of the day, we are working really hard to kind of stay in the present and make sure that we're playing our best football, or the best that we can, from week to week.
Well, so far the Wildcats have done it. Stout defense, executing with efficient offense as well. They're 4-0. They take on South Lakes at home coming up on Friday, September the 21st. That's Coach Chris Haddock of the Centreville Wildcats. Thanks so much, and I'm sure we'll connect soon.
Matt, thanks a lot for having me. We'll talk to you soon.
You bet. That'll do it for our first installment of the VirginiaPreps.com podcast. We want to thank the guests for this episode. That is head football coach Chris Haddock, you just heard, from the Centreville Wildcats, as they are unbeaten and look to keep it going into October. That matchup with Westfield is looming right around the corner, but up first they got South Lakes to worry about. Also, East Rockingham head football coach Donnie Coleman. The Eagles off to a great start. And, of course, Robert Anderson. You can't forget about him from the Roanoke Times. Read his work on Roanoke.com. Pick up a copy of the Roanoke Times out there and follow them on Twitter at Timesland. I'm Matthew Hatfield. Drop us a line. Hit us up on Twitter at Hatfield Sports. Send me an email at hatfieldsports@gmail.com. We're looking to get more partners involved with this VirginiaPreps.com podcast. Also, peruse our site with premium and free content and the message forums. We want to have more interaction with you, the fans, the players, the coaches. Keep this hopping here, and we'll talk to you next time on the VirginiaPreps.com podcast.